when you first got into the business. What advice would you give to, that Jennifer 25 years ago, 20 years ago?
Run. No, I'm kidding. I would definitely tell people, stay really focused and open. You never know where a conversation is going to lead you. This is, as everyone says, a relationship industry, and that person you could be talking to or that you think isn't actually paying attention to what you're saying very well might be, and could lead to being a client or giving you a piece of information that could result in a deal in the future. And just always be open to new conversations and to learning, and just always be present, because I think that will allow you to, just grow as a person and as, I guess you'd call us, a deal maker in this industry.
How did you get your start in retail real estate?
I got my start from the top of a ski mountain. I had been interviewing for a new job to leave what I thought was going to be a career in tax law, and happened into commercial real estate, working for Eric Rubin and Mike Pratt, who were at the time, the, in my opinion, best street brokers in all of DC. So I really lucked into an amazing team and got thrown into the melting pot right away with a big focus on tenant rep at the time. And so that's really where I cut my teeth. And I think why I got hired by them was because in my interview, Eric had just started working with Lululemon, who barely had a presence in the States. And he had handed me their brand deck, barely making eye contact with me, mind you, and was like, where should these people go? And I looked at it and I named some neighborhoods, and he then looked over at me and was like, you just rattled off my tour. I like you. And that's how I got into the industry and haven't looked back. And I feel very lucky that those two guys gave me that opportunity.
Yeah, that's crazy. Yeah, when Lululemon was not really as well known as it is today.
Which is crazy to think there was ever a time where they weren't as well known as they are today. But yeah.
Yeah, 5.1 billion in sales or something like that most recently. Yeah. So, yeah. So you've had, a long reputation working with brands that really shape the market. So what makes a brand a good fit for urban DC right now?
Right now, we see a lot of people in DC leaning into spending time together. So we're seeing a lot of brands in the F&B and wellness space really resonate with the consumer here. People wanting to still be out of the home as that hangover from COVID, and just spend time together with their friends living their life. From, a soft goods perspective, I would say we are a little bit more conservative here. We're not as flashy as some other major metros, and definitely our value proposition is quality. So brands that focus on high quality product and like a little bit more of a conservative aesthetic tend to do really well in DC, less about the trends here, unfortunately.
Name some of those brands, like who?
Veronica Beard is definitely a brand that really resonates here. I feel like I can't go anywhere without seeing a peer in a blazer. All the athleisure really resonates here. I mean, Lululemon's been here obviously a long time, but Vuori and Aloe, because that's just representative, I feel like how people are dressing across the board. You see it's still a good foothold for brands like J. Crew, more heritage American brands. That's definitely like a spot on aesthetic for our market. Aritzia is doing really well here. So I think there's just, we don't get as much of the like flashy brands that maybe have a one-off story to tell here.
Yeah. So what are rents doing right now?
Rents are continuing to climb. So it's like I said, there's a lot of demand and very little supply. For the past couple years, every space that has come on the market, there have been bidding wars. So landlords have been really able to drive up the rent. And every time we hit what we think is the new high, it seems to be that the next space that comes available, there's still a little more competition and a little more ability to drive that rent up. Obviously Georgetown, we're dealing with multi-level spaces. Sometimes they're a little bit narrow. So there are definitely, mitigating factors as to whether you can really continue to push those rents on some spaces. But generally speaking, we're at market highs, and there doesn't really seem to be an end in sight for that.
So what's market high? 200, 300?
I mean, it depends on how you look at it. If you're looking at it just on the ground floor for what someone's paying in total rent, we're definitely well over $200 a foot now. But I think that a little bit is beauty is in the eye of the beholder on how you factor in those rents. But we've seen, over a $50 to $60 a foot increase from a few years ago in terms of base rent on grade. So it's pretty crazy.
What about 14th Street?
14th Street, it hasn't had as strong a story as Georgetown. 14th was definitely a market that was still climbing. And there's been some setbacks just due to what's gone on in the city and in terms of the overall vibe of the neighborhood, where it hasn't found its footing again post COVID. So, whereas rents had been climbing year over year, they've now remained flat, not necessarily rolling back, but you're not seeing that same outsized rent growth that you had seen for the better part of 10 years. It's still very strong with home furnishings, very strong design district and neighborhood retail. And that's the biggest difference between Georgetown and 14th in terms of the consumer pool is 14th is truly a neighborhood. It's a highly local shop, which it's a great local consumer, but it doesn't have that same broad capture area that a market like Georgetown does. So it's just not getting as many eyes on, and it's not getting those first to market doors that Georgetown is seeing.
So you do a lot of work, obviously, outside of the streets as well. So what's different about helping brands expand, on the street in Georgetown or 14th Street versus traditional shopping centers or new developments?
A lot of it is just the inventory, so lack thereof, and then the kind of inventory we have, because 14th Street to some extent, and then really Georgetown and other high streets in our market like Old Town, you're dealing with historic buildings. So brands who want 30, 40, 50 feet of frontage are looking at buildings that on average have 21 to 25 feet of frontage, that have multiple floors. And how do you get that approved? What kind of sales transfer do you see as you go upstairs? Are you getting the conversion rates you want? So the street is definitely more of an education process. Fortunately, we're not number one typically. So brands have been through this in other high streets throughout the US, or if they're abroad already, it's certainly much easier for them to understand. But I'd say that's the biggest difference between the street and the shopping centers and lifestyle centers is the spaces are just not cookie cutter, and that can result in a really cool experience for a tenant, but also a little bit harder to make the deal.
As I talk to different brokers around the country about some of these really high performing streets, two problems are coming up. Either one, rents are getting to the point where, restaurants can't afford it. The numbers are not making sense for a certain type of user, or even more common is just inventory. There's just not enough space. Are those the two challenges you're facing right now in DC?
The biggest thing in Georgetown is inventory. As I
Yeah.
said, it feels like people are willing to pay what it takes to secure the site. There's just very little on the market. And when it does come on, there's just multiple takers for every space. Whereas before it used to be you'd maybe have a handful because people were so turned off by multi-level or how narrow a space was that they'd be willing to wait for something that felt a little bit more ideal. But now if it's available and I can squeeze, I'll take it.
So people are making some compromises that they wouldn't make before right now just because
Yep.
inventory is so tight. Yeah.
Yeah.
So tell me about one of the projects you're working on right now that you're excited about.
So in Georgetown, we work on behalf of Jamestown on Georgetown Park Mall, which is in its, I guess you call it like third phase of redevelopment. Over the past few years, we took some junior anchor space and reconfigured it to bring in Vuori. We took a dark second floor and added it to a ground floor and brought in a Uniqlo flagship. And then we currently have some space available facing the canal in Georgetown, which not M Street frontage, but visibility. And we're really excited about it because as the market's maturing, Market Lane, where Austria Mazza from Steven Starr and Nancy Silverton extends over the canal down towards K. We have a lot of office to resi conversions, and you're creating an extended district off of M Street, and our canal overlook space is smack in the middle of that. And it's also rare to have a large footprint in Georgetown, and we actually just finished our shell work, so it's exciting when you walk into a 7,000 plus square foot space on grade that has 20 plus foot ceiling heights and a really awesome solarium style domed roof. So really excited to get that space out there. It's really unique for DC in general and especially unique for Georgetown.
At the beginning of the interview, we started talking about, when you first got into the business, what advice would you give to, that Jennifer 25 years ago, 20 years ago?
Run. No, I'm kidding. I would definitely tell people, stay really focused and open. You never know where a conversation is going to lead you. This is, as everyone says, a relationship industry, and that person you could be talking to or that you think isn't actually paying attention to what you're saying very well might be and could lead to being a client or giving you a piece of information that could result in a deal in the future. And just always always be open to new conversations and to learning and just always be present because I think that will allow you to, just grow as a person and as, I guess you'd call us, a deal maker in this industry.
Yeah, great. You're a featured broker on Brand March. What value do you think a platform like this can bring to brokers like you?
I think it's a great way to connect with other people who have a similar book of business or product type across the country, a way of just knowing who the like kind people are in other cities. If you don't have the ability to ask existing clients, oh, who do you know in this market? It's a great, easy touch point there. And then doing a lot of tenant rep and doing a lot of surveys, it tends to be easy to find information on shopping centers. But once you get into high streets, like there's not that same information sharing. So I think it's a really interesting platform for brokers, but also tenants and landlords when they're just thinking about a market to go in and get like a slightly broader understanding beyond just what, the major malls and lifestyle centers might be.